Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's show. I'm Andrew Bellers. I'm going to be your host for today. Zach, unfortunately, is not on the show this week. He went down to Missouri and has been doing tapings with the Jim Baker Show this week. But I have what I think is a very important show for you today. I have a lot of content to get through. I really want to get through it all, even a clip that I have to play. So I'm just going to jump right in. As I'm sure you are aware, there's been a lot of buzz this week in Congress about a potential TikTok ban that is gaining bipartisan support. And with it has come a radical bill that, and I promise, this is not an exaggeration, it is like the Patriot Act, but on steroids. And I'm going to be explaining why. And you may have heard about this bill. It's SB 686, and it's called the Restrict Act. And we're going to be going in depth into this bill on the program. Right now it has 25 co-sponsors. 12 of those are Republicans, so almost split right down the middle as far as support in Congress. This bill would not only curtail your free speech rights, but, and this is an angle that not a lot of people are talking about, it could also be used to dismantle the digital currency market in America. Why? So that it can set the stage for an inevitable CBDC, which stands for Central Bank Digital Currency. And that is a currency that would be created, controlled, owned, and monitored by the Federal Reserve. I don't know when this is going to roll out completely in its entirety, but it is coming. Now, this anti-TikTok sentiment, and I want to make it clear, I'm not necessarily making a defense for TikTok on this program, but I do think it's interesting to note that this has been in the works for a little bit over a year. Big tech elites like Meta have been working to shape your opinion on this matter for, like I said, a little bit over a year. For instance, did you know that Meta paid a GOP consulting firm to run a smear campaign on TikTok? Here's an article. Meta paid a GOP consulting firm to drag TikTok through the mud. The social media behemoth enlisted Targeted Victory, a firm founded by the digital director of Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign, to create and run a nationwide campaign of op-eds and letters to the editor targeting TikTok as a threat to young people. Targeted Victory staffers worked to promote stories to regional news outlets about harmful trends that allegedly started on TikTok, when in fact, they actually began on Facebook in some cases. In one example, the firm pushed stories about a devious licks challenge that involved students vandalizing school property. Clips of that trend spread across several states, leading Senator Richard Blumenthal to call for TikTok executives to testify. So this smear campaign was actually the catalyst for legislative action. In reality, that trend actually originated on Facebook. Now, of course, the incentive for a company like Meta to run a hit campaign like this is clear. They're trying to snuff out the competition. But what incentivizes a politically associated group like Targeted Victory to do Meta's dirty work for them? I don't know. Those are the questions that you should be asking, though. Before we get into this Restrict bill, I just want to read a little bit from this article. Restrict Act is Orwellian censorship grab disguised as anti-TikTok legislation. The Restrict Act, introduced by Senators Mark Warner, who's a Democrat, and Tom Thune, who's a Republican, is aimed at blocking or disrupting transactions and financial holdings linked to foreign adversaries that pose a risk to national security. However, the language of the bill could be used to give the U.S. government enormous power to punish free speech. In very specific terms, a lot of U.S. websites would be impacted. Why? Because a lot of websites use third-party plugins or widgets or software created in foreign countries to support the content on their site. The Restrict Act gives the DNI the ability to tell a website using any, quote, foreign content or software that might be engaged in platform communication the U.S. government views as against their interests to shut down or face a criminal charge. That criminal charge, by the way, could be up to $1 million or 20 years in prison, according to this act. In very direct terms, the passage of SB 686 would give the Department of Commerce, DNI, and DHS the ability to shut down what you're reading right now. This is a big deal. So let's start to get into this bill. What kinds of transactions would this bill target? This is in the definitions section. The term covered transaction includes a current, past, what does that mean? Or potential future transaction. With who? With a foreign adversary. Well, what is that? Foreign adversary is defined by the bill, means any foreign government or regime determined by the Secretary, that's the Secretary of Commerce, to have engaged in a long-term pattern or serious instances of conduct significantly adverse to the national security of the United States or the security and safety of United States persons. This term, national security, should be causing a red flag to go up for you, because this is exactly the kind of terminology that was used in the Patriot Act as an umbrella catch-all term for basically anything that the state didn't like. And they would just chalk it up to, well, it's a national security risk or interest. Now, who gets to decide who's a foreign adversary? The Secretary of Commerce and the Director of National Intelligence. These are unelected bureaucrats of the executive branch, and at any point in time, they can add whoever they want to this list of foreign adversaries or take any of them away without any kind of congressional approval. And that's part of the issue with this bill. There is no congressional approval. There are essentially no checks on the executive branch's power and authority that are being granted by this bill. Now, who are the kinds of entities, services, and products that are being targeted by the bill? They're called ICTS-covered holding entities. And it means this: an entity that owns, controls, or manages information and communications technology products or services and has not less than 1 million United States annual active users. Now, one other thing I want to mention about this bill. Nowhere in the bill does it ever mention TikTok. This bill is being promoted as if it's a TikTok ban. It is not a TikTok ban. It is not mentioned in the bill. However, it would give the executive branch the authority to ban something like TikTok. I think TikTok has something like 100 million US users right now. So that falls squarely within the purview of this bill. But it's not just social media services. And that's where things really start to get kind of dicey. So it's technology, products, or services that has not less than 1 million users, or for which more than 1 million units have been sold to persons in the United States. The problem with that is that a vast majority of our technology is manufactured by China. This is not a comprehensive list, but this is a list of potential things that could be covered by this bill. It includes wireless local area networks, mobile networks, satellite payloads, satellite operations and control, cable access points, wireless access points, core networking systems, long, short, and backhaul networks, edge computer platforms, and here is where it gets really interesting. Internet or network-enabled sensors, webcams, endpoint surveillance or monitoring devices, modems, and home networking devices, if greater than 1 million units have been sold to persons in the United States. If you have Wi-Fi in your home, there's a very good chance that the router that you use to access the internet was manufactured in a Chinese factory. If you have an iPhone, it was made in China. If you have any kind of an Apple product, it was probably made in China. A lot of your technological devices were made in China. So those would fall under if China has manufactured and sold at least 1 million units of whatever product that you own to U.S. persons, it would fall under the purview of this bill, which means that the government could potentially monitor your device, and they wouldn't necessarily need your permission because there's nothing in the bill that says that they do. More things that are covered: desktop applications, mobile applications, gaming applications, payment applications, and web-based applications. Like I said, we're going to be talking about how this could be targeting the cryptocurrency or digital currency market. Let's keep going with the bill. The Secretary, in consultation with the relevant executive department and agency heads, is authorized to and shall take action to identify, deter, disrupt, prevent, prohibit, investigate, or otherwise mitigate. That's another one of those catch-all terms. Otherwise mitigate justifies any action that they deem fit to take, including by negotiating, entering into, or imposing and enforcing any mitigation measure to address any risk arising from any covered transaction by any person or with respect to any property subject to the jurisdiction of the United States that the Secretary determines poses an undue or unacceptable risk of catastrophic effects on the security or resilience of the critical infrastructure or digital economy of the U.S. This next point is so interesting because this next point is how the government could potentially use this to go after your free speech rights. Interfering in or altering the result or reported result of a federal election as determined in coordination with the Attorney General. That's Merrick Garland. That's the guy you want to have this kind of authority. The Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of Treasury, and the Federal Election Commission, or otherwise poses an undue, here's another catch-all phrase, undue or unacceptable risk to the national security of the United States or the safety of U.S. persons. So, if they deem that there's some kind of collusion or some kind of meddling that's being perpetrated by foreign adversaries using something like social media, then they can investigate, they can go after, they can shut down, they can use any mitigation measure that they want. You remember the Biden laptop scandal, the Hunter Biden laptop scandal? Remember how Twitter shut that down as soon as that story came out? And how the narrative when that happened was that this isn't real, this is Russian disinformation to interfere in our election to hurt Biden's campaign. Well, whoops, turns out now that the dust has cleared, that laptop scandal was real. It actually did belong to Hunter Biden. Or remember this, the 2016 Trump campaign, which leftists said that Trump won because of Russian meddling, and they did that primarily through fake accounts through social media. And there was investigation after investigation of collusion between Trump and his administration and the Russian government. There were Pulitzer Prize winning New York Times articles. And after all of this investigation, and an impeachment, by the way, and after all of this investigation, what was determined? No collusion. But this is the kind of stuff that they can use to shut down your voice on social media platforms. So I've talked about how they could use this kind of sweeping legislation to go after your personal home devices and how they can go after your social media usage and shut down free speech. But another interesting aspect, like I mentioned, is that this could be used to shut down the digital currency, cryptocurrency market. Why? Why would the government want to do that? Because they can't control cryptocurrency. And they can't abide by that. Here's an article, Potential Crypto Ban. Coin Center raises the alarm on the Restrict Act. And this is what the article says. Coin Center posted a scathing assessment of the Restrict Act, saying the bill proposal could be used to ban crypto. The cryptocurrency advocacy organization highlighted several problems with the bill, including its potential to block and restrict access to open protocols such as the Bitcoin network. Now, like I've said, like we've been saying on the show, the federal government and the Federal Reserve want to establish a CBDC. That's a central bank digital currency. It's a digital currency, and they want to shut down anything that could get in the way of that, which could potentially be cryptocurrency. And the Federal Reserve right now is rolling something out that is basically going to function as the foundation for that CBDC. Consider it something like a soft rollout of this program. This is what the program is called, the FedNow service. And this is from the Federal Reserve website describing what this is. The FedNow service is a new instant payment infrastructure developed by the Federal Reserve that allows financial institutions of every size across the U.S. to provide safe and efficient instant payment services. Through financial institutions participating in the FedNow service, businesses and individuals can send and receive instant payments in real time around the clock every day of the year. And the FedNow service will be deployed in phases. So that's implying that this is just the beginning and that this is going to continue to ramp up, with the initial launch taking place as early as July 2023. Now, I want to play a clip from the Glenn Beck show that aired earlier this week, where he's interviewing Justin Haskins of the Heartland Institute, and they're talking about this FedNow program and how it is going to lead to an inevitable CBDC, a digital US dollar, a federal coin, whatever you want to call it, whatever they're going to name it. It's coming. Here's that clip.
This is a stepping stone to a CBDC. This is our first interaction to using the Fed directly so that we can become more comfortable with it, so it's normalized. And then after this, you're going to get a central bank digital currency. We already know this because there's a billion government reports talking about how they're going to design it, what it's going to look like, why people should use it, what the principles should be behind it, all of that kind of stuff. So we know a CBDC is coming. This is just the first step in that process to try to normalize people interacting directly with the Fed in this sort of high-tech instant transfer payment portal.
So we've been talking about the Uniform Commercial Code, which is complicated, and it's usually nothing anyone should ever have to think about. However, they have included central bank digital currency as the new definition of money. But money makes us think of money that you can take from the bank, that you own it, you get paid, you get to do what you want with it. But central bank digital currency is not really money, correct?
Yeah, what's happening in more than 20 states across the country right now, and it's going to happen in all 50 states eventually, is lawmakers are looking at updating the Uniform Commercial Code so that a foundation is being laid for a future central bank digital currency, and not just any kind of central bank digital currency, but a central bank digital currency that is programmable, trackable, that you won't have any privacy with the things that you're doing with the CBDC, that it can be controlled and manipulated.
This is not like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is such a danger because you get to do with it what you want to do with it, and the Federal Reserve is not aware of anything and can't do anything. You have the ultimate power with your money. The opposite is true with the Fed coin that they will be introducing, and this is what makes it so dangerous. Not just the tracking. They will not just know absolutely everything that you spend, but Justin just said a key word that most people don't really understand. It's programmable, meaning it is programmable for the individual. So in other words, if the government decides that they're going to, we need to cut down on fatties, then my digital coin will not allow me to buy fatty foods. I wouldn't be able to go to McDonald's. I'm using this as an example. There is not, anything in the works to do this, except this is what programmable means. They can program it. So if they say, you know what, nobody's going to work, you're not an essential employee, your coin will not buy gas. So you can go to try to fill up, but when you put your digital card in from the Fed, it will say denied. And you won't have any way other than that card to be able to buy what you need. It is absolute control of your life.
Now, like Glenn mentioned in that video, this CBDC that is going to roll out is going to be completely programmable, meaning that not only will they be able to track and monitor all of your purchases in real time. This is a new system that is going to replace the current currency system. It's going to replace the US dollar. Not only will they be able to monitor and track everything that you do, but they will be able to restrict your ability to make certain kinds of payments that they don't like. They want complete control over your money and what you do with it. And CBDC systems like this are being rolled out all over the world. I'm going to go into another article that may shine a light on what that's going to look like when it rolls out in our country. The world's largest CBDC trial. A preview of the elite's cashless vision for you. This is what the article says. The e-Naira is Africa's first central bank digital currency. Central bankers, academics, politicians, an assortment of elites from over 100 countries hoping to launch their own CBDCs have closely followed the e-Naira. Governments will probably mandate CBDCs as the solution when the next real or contrived crisis hits, which is likely not far off. That's why you must pay attention to what is happening in Nigeria. That way you can know what to expect and take preventative action. Here are the top 5 takeaways that we can take from this sort of test trial of what CBDCs will look like in our future. Insight number 1, don't take the bait. Reject CBDC incentives. In Nigeria, the government implemented discounts and other incentives to increase the adoption of e-Naira. In North America and Europe, expect the government to require CBDCs to receive welfare payments, a potential universal basic income, so-called inflation relief checks. Think of these incentives like the cheese in a mousetrap. Some of the first countries that they are trying these CBDCs with, that you're seeing them roll out right now, are nations that are more impoverished. Countries like, and we've covered this in the show, countries like Iran, where over 50% of the population is reliant on government assistance. Why? Because this is the low-hanging fruit. This is the easiest way to begin implementing this. You need government assistance? Well, the only way that you're going to get it is by accepting our new digital currency, this currency that we can monitor and control. Insight number 2, simultaneous moves to eliminate cash. To help boost e-Naira adoption, the Nigerian government announced a plan to remove the legal tender status of various high-denomination bills, rendering them worthless. When your government imposes a CBDC, expect simultaneous measures to force people out of cash, regardless of the costs. Those measures could come in many flavors, but I would bet they would first look to phase out large denomination bills by removing their legal tender status. We're already seeing this happen. For example, the EU has already phased out the 500 euro note. When this rolls out, they could make your high denomination bills worthless overnight, basically destroying your cash reserves. Next step, next insight, bank restrictions. Most people think of the money they deposit into the bank as a personal asset that they own, but that is not true. Once you deposit money at the bank, it is no longer your property. Instead, it is the bank's, and they can pretty much do whatever they want with it. What you really own is the bank's promise to pay you back. It is an unsecured liability, which makes you technically and legally a creditor of the bank. And since the banking system is intertwined with the government everywhere, it's only prudent to expect governments to place more restrictions on bank accounts as CBDCs debut. This is exactly what happened in Nigeria. Cash withdrawal limits and debit card transaction restrictions were imposed, among other measures. In addition, capital controls made it challenging to send money out of the country. I wouldn't be surprised to see the forced conversion of bank deposits into e-Naira at an unfavorable rate. This is another interesting aspect of this. There will be a conversion rate, and your dollar will be converted. Why? Because they're replacing the old system. Sooner or later, you're going to have to turn in your dollars to be converted into their digital currency. And the sooner you do it, expect there to be incentives. The sooner you convert your dollar, the more favorable rate of exchange you'll get. The more time that you take, the longer that you wait, the worse deal you're going to get. Now, this is also potentially going to be a situation where they use the conversion rate to enact a socialist redistribution process, where maybe you belong to what the cultural Marxists would call the cultural hegemony. What is that? The cultural Marxists have deemed members of the cultural hegemony their enemy. They are the people that they deem to be privileged and in power. And those people include people who are white, male, American, straight, cisgendered, able-bodied, and Christian. So if you belong to that group of people, the more that those traits describe who you are, the less favorable exchange rate you could potentially see when changing your dollar over to this new digital currency. Are you white, male, American, straight, cisgendered, able-bodied, and Christian? Well, maybe you get 75 cents on the dollar if you act now. Are you poor? Well, maybe you get dollar for dollar. Are you poor and oppressed? Well, you just hit the welfare lotto. Maybe you get $1.25 to every dollar that you own when you exchange. That is how they're going to use this to enact a socialist redistribution. Insight number 4, rising inflation. Amid the e-Naira rollout, Nigeria is experiencing some of the highest inflation levels in its history. This is not surprising. CBDCs make it even easier for the government to debase the currency, so it's reasonable to expect more inflation when CBDCs come to town. And the 5th and final insight is social unrest. In another predictable development, frustrated Nigerians took to the streets over the government's actions to restrict cash and bank accounts. There was a violent scramble to exchange old notes before the government deemed them worthless. Riots broke out in several locations. The fact of the matter is, the US dollar is dying, and the government is forcing the death of the dollar so that they can come in and establish this new federal digital coin. And I don't know when it's going to happen. I think it'll probably be sooner than later. I don't know if it's going to be in the next couple of years. I don't know if it's going to be in the next 5 years. And I want to say this. I am not a financial advisor. I'm in no place to give anyone any financial advice. But I do know that if Zach was on the show, he would probably say that it's time to start thinking about divesting from the US dollar and start investing in assets and products that are not going to depreciate as quickly as the dollar. Things like gold and silver, things like hard assets, just things that are not going to depreciate, that will continue to still have value when this transition process happens. But it is going to happen. There is going to be a digital coin. I believe that completely. And part of the reason why I believe that is because of Scripture. The foundations of the financial system that will be established under the end times beast system is being created now. Revelation 13, 16 through 17 says this. Also, it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. How? in the last days, when the world is under the rule of the Antichrist. How will this be possible? How will it be possible that this end times government will be able not only to monitor and track your financial transactions in real time, but also to control them? That is going to be impossible with the current fiat system. It's going to be impossible if we're using hard physical cash. You won't be able to do it. That is why I believe, and we believe on this show, that there is going to be a digital currency. I don't think it's going to be the one that the US government is trying to create now. But those systems that are being created and being rolled out all over the world are laying the foundation for the type of system that will be used in the last days. And I believe that now is the time to prepare. I don't know when that's going to happen, but it is coming. And the only way that we can be ready spiritually is if we are in tune with God's Spirit, and if we're reading His Word, if we're feeding ourselves in His Word, and if we're getting connected to the local church. God wants us to be aware of the times that we're living in, and He wants us to be prepared. Like the parable, building your house on the rock and not the sand. And the rock in that parable, the strong foundation, is Jesus Christ. We know that everything will be shaken, but He will never be shaken, ever. And one of the best ways to do that is to get into your Word daily. Make sure that you're having devotional time with God and communion with His Holy Spirit in these last days. Make sure that you're ready. Thanks for watching the show this week, and we'll see you next week.